Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. So a few years ago, I met a junior developer who had 7 years of experience. His resume actually looked pretty good. When we started the interview, though, things didn't go too hot. So this dude had been writing JavaScript for about a decade, but he did not know ES6 meaning the new standard syntax for JavaScript. Now, this was over 5 years ago, so that could be forgivable, but it was still a bit odd considering they had so much experience in quotes. He also struggled with a simple problem that required iterating over an array and merging some objects together. And I was thinking, how is this possible? Now, here's the weirdest part. When I saw this guy in the interview, I realized I recognized him. I had actually interviewed him years before at another company where he also failed the interview on the same stuff. And it just blew my mind. So I want to tell you this story not only as a cautionary tale, but how to use this as an example of what not to do and how to think about your own career in software development, because so much of what I talk about and what you hear online is how to just get the first job. Just get the first job. And that's really important. I don't want to trivialize that at all. It's the reason why at Parsity, we have a whole career curriculum while we're rolling out a job guarantee, because I get it. That's important. You learn to code because you want to be paid as a developer. But here's the other part. That 6 months to a year you spend getting that first job is really short. And it seems really long, but now you're in it. And when you're in it for a long time. And you don't want to end up in this particular situation. So this developer, the junior with 7 years experience, my only guess is that he had spent all of his time at the current company basically doing the same tasks over and over and over. And I'm sure he was excellent at that particular company. But obviously, we just couldn't move forward with him. Now, I've written about this story before, and people got upset. They said that's completely unfair. Your tests must have been wrong. What do you know? He has more experience than you. I doubt that's even possible. I doubt that's true. I don't know how to explain it to people any more simply. If you've been at a job for 20 years, it does not matter. If you are unable to pass the exams, the tests, the challenges that companies give out, you are going to find yourself in a very difficult position trying to get a job. Now, you will. I guarantee you will. Because a lot of interviews actually have nothing to do with technical ability. That is another dirty secret that no one really talks about online. I've had plenty of interviews where I've aced the technical portion and I've gotten an offer. I've had just as many interviews where it was just a straight up conversation. Was the conversation even a bit technical? I'll be honest. Some of them, I'm shocked they gave me an offer because I could have totally been lying. So, knowing that, I think this guy is probably fine. I wish him the best. But here's what I wish I had done in that moment. What I really wanted to do was pull him to the side after the interview and say, hey, man, here's what you need to learn in order to get better. Because he was likable. He had the experience. I'm sure he would have been great to work with. But how can we just circumvent the process? That would be really unfair to meet somebody and say, you know what, I like that guy. Now, he sucked at the interview and he gave me no indication that he can do any of the work. But you know what? He seemed cool to me. Let's hire him. People do get hired like that, but I think that's a bit unfair. Here's what I did instead of saying all that stuff I should have said. Thanks for your time today. See you never. I think about this story a lot, and I don't want you to fall into the same trap. I want you to get to senior developer at some point, just like I want all the students that go to Parsity or that I've worked with to get to senior developer at some point. I think it's important. And maybe some of you are wondering, why didn't you give him some feedback if he asked for it? Would you have given him feedback if he asked for it? No, I would not have. Unfortunately, a lot of companies won't allow you to give feedback for various reasons. Cultural, social, legal being the number one reason why you wouldn't want to give somebody feedback. Imagine if you had individuals at a company giving people feedback on an interview they'd done. And if they said something that was inappropriate or gave away too much information about the actual challenge or the testing strategy, that could be unfair to candidates that are coming in after that person. Also, if you interview something like 20 people, is it reasonable to expect that they can all get particular actionable feedback? I don't know. I can tell you this. When I was in charge of the hiring process at my most recent role, I did make sure we gave people feedback that asked for it. And we had very specific guidelines about what we could and could not say. Would I still do that? It depends on the company and so many other factors. But there's a lot of terrible advice on LinkedIn, and maybe you've read some of this junk that I want to clear up today. Titles don't matter. Seniors need 10 years of experience. Senior coders are the best ones on the team. And if you just get experience, then don't worry about the titles because they'll just naturally come to you. Now, some of that advice is right, and all of it's wrong. There's just very little advice I can say applies to everybody. So some of this stuff may be true. In my experience, working with tons of developers, talking with literally 500 freaking developers over the last few years. Go check out that episode, by the way, if you haven't. That's been one of the most interesting experiences I've had, speaking literally with over 500 developers from everywhere around the world and getting a very clear idea, or at least a better idea, of what is really going on out there. So let's get to it. The senior developer title is wildly different at each company. You still need to chase it. Why? I think, first of all, there's a bit of an unhealthy obsession that developers have, me included, with getting to the senior title. But there is a good reason. On one end of the developer spectrum is the junior. They're expendable, they're cheap, and plentiful, and they need a lot of guidance. They are an important investment, but also a bit of a gamble. And I took this gamble at my most recent company where they said, well, you can hire one senior or you can hire two juniors. I chose to hire two juniors. Was that a good investment? I think so. One of them ended up being promoted into a mid-level role. The other one that stayed ended up being a senior. Great deal for us, right? Just from a purely financial perspective, excellent deal. Excellent deal on talent. Now, if they had left after that first year, we would have lost and they would have actually won. So it's a game like everything else. I use the analogy of a game a lot because it is. It's a game. We're all trying to play this game of getting cheaper labor, of getting, the best for the least that we can. And on the other end of this spectrum is the senior. Now, these people can make or break the team through their influence on the code base, the processes. They tackle the really tough bugs. They make sure the team doesn't overcommit or do changes that are unnecessary. They've made all the mistakes and they know how to avoid them. They are in demand. They're hard to find, and the salary jump from junior to senior is significant. Now, you may be reading about the layoffs and all this fear-mongering that's going on online. Let me just tell you my experience. Super hard to hire seniors. Really hard to get them for interviews, anyone that's any good, that has a technical skill and also has the social skill. That's a big one. There's a lot of senior developers out there that are really good at coding, but that's it. And they are going to be more expendable, I'll say. So if you have some social awareness, some emotional intelligence, you have the desire to mentor people, you're going to be in demand. Personally, me right now, I'm on the job market and I'm seeing tons of interview requests and I'm in a pretty nice position. And I don't say that to brag or anything like that. I mean, this is before I had a following on social media or was doing any podcasts. Back when I was just, writing code and pretty silent online, I was still having this experience. And most seniors are also having that experience. I've met senior developers in their 50s and 60s, 70s even. And these people were like too smart. They just didn't want to manage developers. They just wanted to code. They were generally amazing people to work with. So how do you shorten your path from junior to senior? I don't think everything is about making it so fast and speed running through your whole life to get places. But I do think there's a really slow way to do things. And I think there's a not so slow way to do things. So I want to go over the not slow way, if that's cool with you. Because my guess is if you're listening to this, you're likely an adult. You're likely thinking about transition careers, or maybe you already have. And you're at some stage in the earlier parts of your developer journey, of your software developer life cycle. So how do you get quicker to the places where you want to be? Because you want to be at senior and you do need that title. Don't let anybody fool you or tell you differently. That title will affect the next title you get. It'll affect your pay range. It'll affect all sorts of things. And people say, what does the title matter? The title doesn't matter. Just call me whatever you want. Call me the janitor. That's not going to work. It's just not. So don't fall. I hate that advice actually. Oh, don't worry about chasing titles. Just do all the work. Just do the work of a senior engineering manager as a junior, and don't worry, you'll be paid eventually. No, you will not. Maybe if you're lucky, you will, but you likely won't. So here's how you really do it, according to me at least. So getting to senior developer is as much about writing good code as it is about gathering experiences and software related knowledge. You'll need to know when to buy versus build a solution. When your company comes to you and says, hey, we need to create a payment processor solution to accept credit cards. Do you build that or do you use something like Stripe? Ideally, you would use something like Stripe. Or then the company says, well, our budget's only X and we can't afford that. We say, well, now we have to build it, don't we? Right? But these are the trade-offs that you have to consider when you're looking at solutions. You'd have to know how to work within an organization. There's design teams, there's product teams, there's data science, DevOps, engineering team. How do these all play together? What are their shared interests? How do the dynamics work in the organization? You know, does creating one feature step on the toes of another feature? Do you adding that new click event to the button mess up something that the data science team was trying to capture? You also need to recognize micro and macro trends. Micro trends meaning things that are emerging in the technology space. Macro trends being things like TypeScript, AWS, serverless, containerization. These are macro trends, React, that dominate the industry. That's exactly why at Parsity, by the way, we've incorporated things like TypeScript, Next.js, React, soon to be serverless into our curriculum. These are things you cannot escape. Micro trends might be something like Rust, which is bubbling up into a macro trend. I'm also experimenting with adding that into the curriculum. And I think we'll be the only coding school that is looking into that at all at this point, which I think will be really cool to start using. Also, how do you manage expectations and deadlines? These are all things you're going to have to know how to do. So what do you do? Well, you could read a bunch of books. You could think about it a whole bunch. But really, action is the only thing that will cure your anxiety. So you want to gather these experiences, and how do you do that? Let's say you get hired. You want to be one of the first people to raise your hand for incidents when they happen. Something blows up. You say, hey, I could take a look at that. Who's taking a look at that? I want to shadow them and take a look too. That's going to help you get acquainted with some features and code that you may not come into contact with on your own, and also see how a person that understands how to debug a complex issue, how they're doing it. You can say, oh, I never would have thought of that. And then you can start copying the things that they're doing and applying them to your own workflow, right? Take on features that are outside of your comfort zone. For the first couple of years of the job I was at, I was just trying to keep my head above water. So they wanted to know who could change the color of a button? Me. Luckily, I had good managers that says, you know what? I want you to take on this really difficult project. I had several good managers throughout my career, really, really helpful, because they said, you know what? Take on this thing that's a little outside your comfort zone. If they hadn't done that, I would have been stuck, and I might have had a career more like the guy that had the 7 years of the same experience over and over and over. It's really easy to fall into that trap. You can't do that. It's actually a really dangerous thing to do, because eventually you change the color of a button and you take on these easy tasks. And the next thing you know, you sit around and you look back and you think, what have I done in the last 4 years? What's the one thing I've done that's been interesting? And how can I apply that and sell myself as a senior developer at the next place? One of the best things you can do is just read a book on design patterns and software architecture. There's a ton of them out there. There's Clean Code. There's design patterns in JavaScript. There's DO Factory, which shows you design patterns in JavaScript. Check all this stuff out. You'll see that there's a lot of the same problems that people have solved many times over. And most of the things you're trying to think about and how to solve them have already been solved. There's already patterns for doing all this stuff. You're just not aware of them. And once you are aware of them, you'll see how your code fits into this bigger picture. Another thing you can do, just ask your manager. Say, hey, what's the biggest pain point? See if you can solve it. Sometimes like, damn, you know what the biggest pain point is? Like, no one says anything in meetings. Or, oh man, everybody's always late. No one puts on their cameras. Or it's things that you may not consider. You might think, oh, I thought it was going to be something really deeply technical. And they're thinking, you know, it'd be really nice if somebody just like talked in a meeting. And you're thinking, oh, well, here's my opportunity. It gives you a better understanding of the kind of things you might need to know and what you should do in order to gather that knowledge. Maybe it is something really technical. Maybe it's like, well, damn, this service is really slow. And it's, my manager's on my back about it because they know that this is our most, popular service on our website. We're a Tinder service, and we can't find the hottest three dudes in the 3 mile radius or whatever, and that's killing our customer base. You think, well, maybe I should look at this thing. Also, look up previous tasks that seniors have completed. You can look at their code base. If you're learning to code, you can go on GitHub, look at the open issues and some of these solutions for popular repos like Next.js or Redux or React, and see if you can learn something by looking at how somebody else solved the problem. The easiest way to track your progress towards senior is to look at the scope of your work. If it's widening, you're on the right track. So you should be going from making sure that your code works, to making sure some component works, to ensuring the quality of the project, to researching solutions for the team, and then introducing patterns that other people can use, as well as managing deadlines and coordinating with multiple developers. That's generally where you want to go. You want to go away from, I'm making a function that works, to the team has a deadline that we have to hit. Who's on track? Who's not on track? Who can I help? What pattern should we have used? What can we learn, and how can we apply that? This is another one of reason number 4,269 why I'm less afraid of AI than I think most people on the internet pretend to be. Because what's it going to do? Is it going to coordinate with all these multiple teams to do these kinds of things? Writing code is so much more than writing code. Your code has to go through so many checks, balances, people, teams, deadlines, competing interests, that having a machine do all that for you and coordinate with all these people, I don't see it happening at all. Not in our lifetime. And if it does, then it makes me think that the other people in that chain have also been automated, which means we're all, getting paid a living wage to kick back, twiddle our thumbs, and, scroll YouTube or something all day. Anyway, here's the most important thing. Just freaking ask. Pull your manager to the side, team lead, CTO, whoever. Whisper in their ear, or don't do that at all. That'd be really, really creepy. You say, hey, what do I do specifically to get closer to senior level? But don't whisper. Lastly, be kind of patient. Jog towards senior, don't sprint. Some companies have these arbitrary years of experience requirements. I think these are dumb for the most part. I don't think you can be senior in 1 year. I also don't think that doing the same thing for 7 years, like the person I spoke about, makes you a senior either. I've met anomalies on either end of the spectrum. I've met a guy with 1 year of experience that was definitely senior, total genius. Met the dude with 7 years of experience, totally a junior. Didn't matter how many times he changed the color of that button, right? By the way, if you are finally looking to learn to code, get hired, and maybe be a senior developer with 7 years of experience and not a junior developer with 7 years of experience, join Parsity, schedule a call with me if you're serious. Always hope that kind of stuff is helpful. And by the way, I'm always curious to know what kind of topics you want to hear about. What kind of guests do you want us to have? What kind of topics would you like me to speak about? Really curious. So let me know. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Find me wherever you got to find me. Drop me a line. Let me know. Thank you. See you later. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out parsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it. See you next week.